The alarm shattered the silence of Fort Braxton at 14:32 hours. Not the usual drill tone that everyone had grown accustomed to ignoring. This was different. This was the sound that made veterans freeze mid-step, and rookies look around with wide, confused eyes. The emergency klaxon that meant something had gone terribly, irrevocably wrong. Evacuate immediately. All personnel clear the area within 15 minutes. General Solomon Webb's voice thundered through the base-wide speaker system, cutting through conversations, interrupting training sessions, and stopping hearts. 62 years old, 40 years of military service, 5 stars gleaming on his shoulders. When Solomon Webb gave an order, the earth itself seemed to comply. At the K9 training facility, the largest military working dog center on the East Coast, handlers scrambled to their feet. 30 dogs. 30 of the most elite Belgian Malinois and German Shepherds ever trained by the United States military. Each one valued at over $100,000. Each one capable of detecting explosives, tracking enemies across miles of hostile terrain, and taking down armed combatants with surgical precision. The handlers grabbed leashes, issued commands in crisp German, the traditional language of military dog training. Platz, higher, fuss. The dogs did not move, not a single one. 30 pairs of intelligent, predatory eyes remained fixed on a single point across the training yard. 30 muscular bodies stayed rooted to the ground, as if gravity had suddenly tripled beneath their paws. Handlers pulled on leashes until the leather creaked. The dogs didn't even acknowledge them. Sergeant Caleb Reeves, the facility's technology specialist, pulled out his electronic control device, the ultrasonic frequency emitter that could make any trained dog respond within seconds. He pressed the button. Nothing. The dogs didn't so much as twitch an ear, and then, one by one, they turned their heads. 30 war machines bred for violence and precision all looked toward the same spot, toward the small woman standing beside the medical supply cart near the veterinary clinic entrance. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, weathered hands wrapped around a roll of gauze bandages, the faded blue uniform of a low-level veterinary assistant. Willow Thornton, 52 years old. The woman everyone on base referred to as the old lady who mops the clinic floors. Captain Derek Hollis stormed across the training yard, his face already flushing red with anger. 34 years old, built like a tank, medals clustered across his chest like barnacles on a warship. As the head K9 trainer at Fort Braxton, these dogs were his responsibility, his pride, his carefully cultivated weapons, and right now they were ignoring him completely. "Hey, old woman," his voice cracked across the yard like a whip. "What the hell did you do to my dogs?" Willow said nothing. She simply set the gauze down on the cart with a movement so careful, so deliberate, it seemed almost ceremonial. 30 dogs lay down simultaneously, not scattered, not random. They formed a perfect circle around her, their bodies creating a living barrier of muscle and teeth. Their eyes never left her face, but their ears swiveled constantly, tracking every sound in the environment. Guard formation, protection detail. General Webb descended from the command platform, his boots striking the concrete with the measured cadence of a man who had walked through battlefields and boardrooms with equal authority. He stopped at the edge of the training yard, watching the scene unfold with narrowing eyes. In 40 years of service, he had seen dogs disobey handlers. He had seen confused animals, frightened animals, aggressive animals. But he had never, in all his decades of military experience, seen 30 perfectly trained war dogs spontaneously form a defensive perimeter around a veterinary assistant. What in the world is happening here? The words came out as barely more than a whisper, but they carried the weight of genuine bewilderment, because whatever was happening in front of him, it wasn't in any training manual he had ever read. And in the next 20 minutes, everything General Solomon Webb thought he knew about these dogs, about this woman, and about the very nature of military working dog programs would collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. Fort Braxton wasn't just any military installation. Sprawling across 1,200 acres of North Carolina wilderness, it served as the nerve center for the Army's most advanced K9 operations. 200 personnel worked within its fences, from handlers and trainers to veterinarians and support staff. The veterinary clinic, a state-of-the-art facility that rivaled many civilian animal hospitals, processed hundreds of cases each month. And somewhere in the hierarchy of that facility, at the very bottom of the organizational chart, sat Willow Thornton. 3 years she had worked here. 3 years of mopping floors, preparing examination rooms, restraining dogs during vaccinations, and fetching supplies for the actual medical professionals. 3 years of being invisible. This morning had started like every other. She arrived at 05:30 before the handlers brought in their first appointments, cleaned the surgical suite, sterilized the instruments, checked the medication inventory. Small tasks, invisible tasks, the kind of work that kept a facility running but never earned recognition or respect. Kennel 7 housed Reaper, a Belgian Malinois with a reputation for aggression that had sent 3 handlers to the infirmary. When Willow passed his enclosure on her morning rounds, the dog that had once torn through a protection suit like tissue paper simply lay down and rolled onto his side. Nobody noticed. When Captain Derek Hollis arrived at 0800 to begin the day's training schedule, he brought with him the particular brand of arrogance that came from being the best at something and knowing it. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of chiseled jaw that belonged on recruitment posters, Derek had spent 15 years climbing the ranks of military dog training. He had personally overseen the deployment of over 50 working dogs to combat zones. His methods were considered cutting edge. His attitude was considered insufferable. "Move," he said, brushing past Willow in the clinic hallway, not asking, not even acknowledging her as a person, just issuing a command the same way he might tell a dog to sit. Willow stepped aside, said nothing. Derek snatched a medical file from the counter, glanced at it, then thrust it toward her without looking. "Get these records to Dr. Chen, and try not to touch anything else. You're a floor mopper, not a medical professional. Know your place." The file slipped from his careless grip. Papers scattered across the freshly mopped tile. Willow knelt to gather them. Her eyes, for just a moment, swept across the hallway in a pattern that had nothing to do with finding dropped documents. Camera positions, door locations, distance to the nearest exit. The assessment took less than 2 seconds, and it happened so automatically that she wasn't even aware she'd done it. No one else noticed either. By 1000, the clinic had filled with the usual morning chaos. Handlers bringing in dogs for routine checkups. Trainers reviewing medical clearances for upcoming deployment. Administrative staff shuffling paperwork between departments. Master Sergeant Amber Voss arrived at 10:15, her perfectly pressed uniform a stark contrast to her cruel smile. At 38, she managed all civilian personnel in the K-9 division, a position that gave her just enough power to make certain people's lives miserable while maintaining plausible deniability about her behavior. Willow was her favorite target. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amber announced to a group of officers waiting for their dogs' examinations, gesturing toward Willow with the theatrical flourish of a tour guide pointing out a particularly unimpressive landmark. "I'd like you to meet our facilities team. Well, facility singular. Willow here is our only janitor, or assistant, or whatever we're calling her this week." Light laughter rippled through the group. "Don't mind her hovering around your dogs. She's completely harmless. Couldn't tell a Malinois from a golden retriever if her life depended on it." Amber's smile widened. "Dr. Chen keeps her around out of the goodness of her heart. You know how it is. Some people just need a little charity." More laughter, louder this time. Willow continued preparing the examination room, as if she hadn't heard a word, as if the humiliation rolling off those uniformed shoulders couldn't touch her. But her hands never stopped moving, and when a German shepherd being led past suddenly lunged toward another dog, she stepped between them with a positioning so perfect, so instinctive, that the near fight ended before it began. The handlers didn't notice her intervention. They were too busy congratulating themselves on their quick reflexes. Corporal Levi Martinez did notice. 24 years old, fresh out of the military working dog handler course, Levi had been assigned to Fort Braxton only 3 months ago. He was still learning the politics of the place, still figuring out who to trust and who to avoid. But something about the old woman in the faded blue uniform had caught his attention from his very first day. It was the way she moved, not the shuffling gait of someone beaten down by decades of manual labor. Something else, something he couldn't quite identify but recognized on an instinctual level. The way her feet never tangled, the way she always seemed to know where everyone in a room was standing without looking at them, the way she held herself even while being mocked, spine straight, shoulders level, like a soldier. He watched her now as she cleaned up after the German Shepherd incident, her movements efficient and economical. No wasted motion, no hesitation, and when she caught him staring, her eyes met his for just a moment. Ancient eyes, eyes that had seen things. Then she looked away, and she was just the old janitor again. Sergeant Caleb Reeves appeared at 1100, tablet computer tucked under one arm, and Bluetooth earpiece firmly lodged in his ear. The 29-year-old tech specialist represented everything modern about military dog training. He had developed custom software for tracking canine vital signs during operations. He had pioneered the use of ultrasonic directional commands. He believed, with the fervor of a true believer, that technology would eventually make traditional handling methods obsolete. He also believed that anyone over 40 was essentially a fossil. "Excuse me," he said, stepping around Willow as she restocked the supply cabinet. "Coming through with actual equipment. Wouldn't want you to accidentally break something expensive." Willow moved aside without comment. Caleb set up his monitoring station near the examination area, preparing for a scheduled evaluation of several dogs' responsiveness to electronic commands. One of the subjects, a particularly anxious Malinois named Storm, began pacing in his kennel, whimpering at the unfamiliar equipment. "Relax, buddy," Caleb muttered, adjusting frequency settings. "Just a little sonic magic. You'll barely feel it." Storm's whimpering intensified. Willow, passing by with a mop bucket, paused near the kennel. Without breaking stride, without even appearing to acknowledge the dog, she made a small gesture with her left hand, barely a twitch of fingers. The movement lasted perhaps half a second. Storm immediately lay down, calm and quiet. Caleb didn't notice. He was too busy congratulating himself on his equipment's soothing electromagnetic field. Levi Martinez, watching from across the room, felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. What he had just witnessed wasn't a coincidence. That hand signal had meant something. But what? Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Are you enjoying this story? If you are, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Your support means everything to us and helps us create more content like this. Now, back to Willow and those 30 military dogs who just refused a 5-star general's direct order. What do they know that everyone else doesn't? The emergency that changed everything began at 14:29 hours. Dr. Iris Chen, the facility's chief veterinarian, was in the middle of a routine surgery when her pager buzzed with a priority alert. 40 years old, with gentle hands and observant eyes, she had served as Fort Braxton's senior animal medical officer for the past 8 years. She had also, for the past 3 years, kept a secret that grew heavier with each passing day. "Willow," she called softly, stepping out of the surgical suite still wearing her operating gown. "I need the emergency kit prepared. Something's happening." Willow nodded, already moving toward the supply room, but she paused at the doorway, her head tilting slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. "They know," she said quietly. Dr. Chen's breath caught. "Know what?" But Willow was already gone, and 3 minutes later the alarms began. The evacuation order threw Fort Braxton into controlled chaos. Personnel filed toward designated assembly points. Vehicles mobilized. Security protocols activated with mechanical precision. At the K9 facility, handlers prepared to move their 30 assigned dogs to the secure evacuation kennels 300 meters from the main buildings. Standard procedure. They had drilled this dozens of times. The dogs refused to go. Rex, the pack's alpha, a 100-pound Belgian Malinois with a bite force that had been measured at over 700 pounds per square inch, planted his feet and growled at his handler. Not an aggressive growl, a warning, a statement of absolute refusal. The other 29 dogs followed his lead. "What the hell is wrong with them?" Captain Derek Hollis grabbed Rex's leash with both hands, hauling backward with all his considerable strength. The dog didn't budge. It was like trying to move a granite statue. "Platz!" Derek commanded. "Lie down." Rex remained standing. "Higher!" "Come here." Rex turned his head away dismissively. "Fuss! Heel!" Rex yawned. Lieutenant Colonel Fiona Pierce arrived at the training yard at 14:35 hours, her expression as cold as Arctic ice. 45 years old, the base's executive officer had built her career on efficiency and protocol. She did not tolerate deviation. She did not accept excuses. And she absolutely did not understand what she was looking at. "Report," she snapped at Derek. "Ma'am, the dogs won't respond. Any of them. To any commands. It's like they've all suddenly gone deaf and blind." Fiona's gaze swept across the yard, taking in the bizarre tableau. 30 dogs sitting in a perfect circle around a cleaning woman? "Who is that civilian?" And why is she still in the secure area during an evacuation? That's Willow, ma'am. She's Dr. Chen's assistant. Cleans the clinic, that sort of thing. Get her out, now. This area is restricted to essential personnel only. Yes, ma'am. Derek nodded toward two military police officers. Escort her to the evacuation point. The MPs approached Willow with the casual confidence of men who had never encountered a situation they couldn't handle, with a firm grip and an authoritative voice. They were 4 steps away when Rex stood up. 1 step later, all 30 dogs were on their feet. By the time the MPs reached within arm's length of Willow, they were facing 30 snarling war machines whose teeth gleamed like rows of combat knives. "Holy cow," one of the MPs whispered, backpedaling so fast he nearly tripped over his own boots. General Webb descended from the command platform at 14:38 hours. He walked with the measured stride of a man who had never needed to hurry, whose very presence commanded time itself to slow down and pay attention. The training yard fell silent at his approach. Even the dogs stopped growling, though their protective formation around Willow remained firmly in place. "General, sir," Fiona said, saluting crisply, "we have an unexplained behavioral anomaly with the canine units. They appear to be protecting a civilian staff member and refusing all commands." Webb studied the scene. 30 dogs, perfect formation, absolute discipline in their refusal to obey, and at the center, a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes who looked like she should be baking cookies for grandchildren, not standing at the nexus of a military mystery. "What's your name?" he asked her directly. "Willow Thornton, sir." Her voice was quiet but steady. "I work in the veterinary clinic. These dogs seem to disagree with your job description." Willow said nothing. Webb walked a slow circle around the protective formation, his analytical mind cataloging details. The dog's positioning wasn't random. It was tactical. Overlapping fields of vision, staggered spacing to prevent any single attack from taking out multiple animals. Response zones that covered every approach vector. This wasn't instinct. This was training. "Captain Hollis," Webb said without turning around, "where did these dogs receive their foundational training?" "Various programs, sir. Some from our standard pipeline, some imported from European breeding facilities. All certified through standard military working dog protocols. And yet they're executing a formation I've never seen in any standard protocol." Derek's face reddened. "Sir, I can assure you, my training program is completely by the book. Whatever these animals are doing right now isn't something I taught them. Obviously." The single word landed like a slap. Derek's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Master Sergeant Amber Voss approached the general with a tablet in hand, her earlier mockery of Willow replaced by urgent professionalism. "Sir, I pulled the civilian's personnel file. Willow Thornton, age 52. Previous employment, veterinary nurse at a civilian animal hospital in Montana, hired as a low-level assistant 3 years ago at Dr. Chen's request. No military background, no special training, no flags of any kind." "Then explain this." Webb gestured at the 30 dogs who remained utterly fixated on their protective duty. "I can't, sir." "Neither can I, and that bothers me considerably." Dr. Iris Chen emerged from the clinic at 14:42 hours, her surgical gown now replaced by a standard uniform jacket. She walked toward the group with the careful steps of someone approaching a minefield, her eyes flicking between Willow and the general with barely concealed anxiety. "General Webb, sir, perhaps I can offer some insight." "Please do, Doctor, because right now I'm looking at 30 of our most valuable military assets behaving in a way that defies everything we know about canine psychology." Iris took a breath. "Wheat. These dogs, they were trained using an older methodology, a program that was discontinued about 20 years ago. It emphasized bonding with specific handler types rather than responding to general command structures." "What program?" "I only know rumors, sir. Classified material well above my clearance level, but I've heard it referred to as..." She hesitated. "Generation 3 protocol." The name meant nothing to Derek or Amber or Fiona, but General Webb's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and his entire body went still for exactly 2 seconds. "Where did you hear that name, Doctor?" "My father served in Afghanistan in the early 2000s, sir. He mentioned it once, just once. He said it was the most impressive thing he ever saw, and the most classified thing he was never allowed to talk about." Webb turned back to look at Willow, really look at her this time. The gray hair, the weathered hands, the quiet strength in her bearing that he had initially dismissed as stubbornness. "Sergeant Reeves," he called out, "get on your computer. I want everything you can find about Generation 3 protocol, and I want it 5 minutes ago." Caleb's fingers were already flying across his tablet keyboard. "Yes, sir. Accessing military databases now." The second alarm klaxon sounded at 14:45 hours, more urgent than the first. "Sir," a communications officer jogged up to the general, "we've confirmed a security breach. Unknown threat vector. Estimated time to containment failure, 20 minutes. Source of the threat? Unknown, sir. That's what's concerning. Our sensors detected an intrusion signature, but we can't localize it. 20 minutes. 20 minutes to move 200 personnel to safety, secure critical assets, and neutralize an unknown threat." Webb made a decision. Continue evacuation procedures. Get these dogs moved by whatever means necessary. "Sir," Caleb looked up from his tablet, face pale, "I can sedate them. I have tranquilizer darts that can—" "Don't." The single word came from Willow, not loud, not dramatic, but it carried an authority that made everyone stop. Webb turned to face her. "Excuse me?" "The dosage you're calculating will kill them. These dogs have an unusual metabolism. Standard sedation protocols will stop their hearts within 90 seconds of injection." Caleb sputtered. "That's ridiculous. I have their exact weight measurements. The dosage is perfectly calculated. Your calculations are based on standard military working dogs. These aren't standard. And how would a cleaning lady know anything about pharmaceutical dosing in military animals?" Willow met his eyes without flinching. "Because I know these dogs better than you do." The standoff stretched for 3 long seconds. Caleb's face cycled through disbelief, offense, and finally something approaching uncertainty. Because the old woman wasn't backing down, wasn't looking away, wasn't showing any of the deference he expected from someone in her position. "She's right about the metabolism," Dr. Chen said quietly. "I've noted anomalies in their blood work since they arrived. I couldn't explain it. I still can't." General Webb made another decision. Hold the sedation, for now. He stepped closer to Willow, close enough to see the fine lines around her eyes and the calluses on her hands that spoke of decades of hard work. "You seem to know a great deal about these animals, Ms. Thornton." "I know enough. Would you care to demonstrate?" Willow was silent for a long moment. Then she raised her left hand and made a small, complex gesture that lasted perhaps 2 seconds. A subtle twist of fingers, a specific positioning of the thumb. 30 dogs sat down simultaneously, not in their protective circle, in perfect rows. 4 ranks of 7, with 2 additional dogs flanking the formation like sentries. Military precision, parade ground perfection. The handlers who had spent years training these animals stared in slack-jawed astonishment. "How?" Derek's voice cracked. "That's not in any manual. That's not any command I've ever seen. How did you do that?" Willow lowered her hand, but didn't answer. Levi Martinez, standing at the edge of the group, bent down and picked something up from the ground, something small and metallic that had fallen during the earlier confrontation. He turned it over in his palm, and his blood ran cold. Dog tags, military identification tags, but not standard issue. The embossed image showed a wolf's head with blood-red eyes. Beneath it, Latin text, Umbra Luporum, Shadow of the Wolves. He had never seen this insignia before. It wasn't in any database he knew, but something about it made his instincts scream that he was holding something he wasn't supposed to see. He looked up at Willow. She was already watching him, her expression unreadable, and then she looked away, and the moment passed. And Levi was left standing there with questions burning in his chest and no idea who to ask for answers. Sergeant Caleb Reeves hit a wall at 14:51 hours. His classified database access, substantial as it was, couldn't penetrate the encryption surrounding the files he was trying to reach. Every search query about Generation 3 protocol returned the same result. Access denied. Level 7, clearance required. "Sir," he reported to General Webb, "I found the file, but it's locked behind the highest security classification I've ever seen. I'd need presidential authorization to access it." "What can you tell me?" "Just the header information. Generation 3 protocol, K9 Special Operations Unit, established 1998. Founder designated as the Shepherd, and there's a status notation." "What status?" Caleb's voice dropped. "Confirmed deceased. Kandahar, Afghanistan. August 2003. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Webb turned to look at Willow again. Kandahar. 20 years ago. The bloodiest chapter of the Afghan War, when special operations units were dying in ambushes that seemed almost supernaturally well planned. Dr. Chen, he said slowly, you mentioned your father served in Afghanistan. Yes, sir. Did he ever mention a unit called Ghost Pack? Iris's face went pale. Once, sir, just once. He said they saved his life, him and 6 others in his squad. He said, her voice wavered, he said the woman who led them was the bravest person he ever met, and then he said she died getting them out. Did he ever describe this woman? No, sir. He said it was classified. He said he had sworn an oath never to speak of it. Webb walked back toward Willow. 30 dogs tracked his movement, but remained in their perfect formation, making no move to interfere. He stopped 2 feet from her, close enough to study every line on her face. Ms. Thornton, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Have you ever served in the United States military? Willow's expression didn't change. My personnel file should answer that question, General. Your personnel file says you were a veterinary nurse in Montana for 30 years before coming here. But personnel files can be created. Identities can be fabricated. I've seen it done before. He paused. Usually by intelligence agencies. Then you would know more about that than I would. Perhaps. Webb studied her a moment longer. But I'll tell you what I know. I know these dogs are executing tactical formations that don't exist in any training program we currently use. I know they're responding to hand signals that aren't in any handler's manual. I know they've formed a protective detail around you specifically, out of 30 personnel in this facility, as if you were the most valuable asset on this entire base. He leaned slightly closer. And I know that the last time I saw formations like these was in a classified briefing 20 years ago about a unit that officially never existed, run by someone who was officially dead. Willow said nothing. The Shepherd, Webb continued softly. That's what they called her. The woman who created the most effective canine operations unit in military history. The woman who ran 12 impossible missions and never lost a single dog. The woman who supposedly died in Kandahar, saving 7 soldiers from an ambush that should have killed them all. Still nothing. My question, Ms. Thornton, is simple. Webb's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. If the Shepherd died 20 years ago, why are her dogs still following her commands? Before Willow could respond, a new voice cut across the training yard. General Webb, we have a problem. A security officer ran toward them, tablet in hand. Sir, we've completed a sweep of the facility. We found something in the weapons depot. An unregistered electronic device. Still analyzing, but preliminary readings suggest... Suggest what? Explosives, sir. C4 composite, enough to take out half the base. The words hit like a physical blow. 200 personnel, critical military assets, all potentially sitting on top of a bomb that no one had known was there. How did it get past our sensors? Unknown, sir. The device appears to have been masked using highly sophisticated countermeasures. We only detected it because... The officer hesitated. Because one of the dogs was acting strangely near the depot, kept trying to get in. We thought it was just anxiety from the alarms. Webb turned to look at the 30 dogs still sitting in perfect formation around Willow. Then he looked at Willow herself. You knew, he said. Not a question. Willow met his eyes, and for the first time something changed in her expression. The mask of the invisible cleaning lady slipped, just slightly, revealing something harder underneath. Something dangerous. They knew, she said, nodding toward the dogs. 20 minutes ago, before your alarms even triggered, they smelled the C4 and the detonator chemicals. That's why they wouldn't evacuate. They were trying to tell you. No one was listening. And you? I was listening. Webb's mind raced through implications. The dogs had detected the threat before the sensors. They had refused evacuation not out of malfunction, but out of duty. And this woman, this supposed cleaning lady, had understood their behavior when trained handlers had not. Can you help us find it? Neutralize it? Willow was quiet for a long moment. The decision she was about to make would end 3 years of careful anonymity, 3 years of sweeping floors and being mocked, and watching from the shadows while she searched for something she needed. But 200 lives hung in the balance. And whatever else she had become in her years of hiding, she had never stopped being a soldier. Yes, she said finally. "I can help." She raised her hand and gave another signal, more complex than before. The 30 dogs rose as one unit. 10 sprinted toward the weapons depot. 10 spread out in a perimeter pattern around the training area. 10 remained with the main group, their attention split between protecting Willow and monitoring the assembled personnel. No verbal commands, no electronic aids, just hand signals and absolute obedience. Captain Derek Hollis watched with his mouth hanging open. In 15 years of dog handling, he had never seen anything like it, not even close. "That's impossible," he breathed. "You can't give separate commands to different groups simultaneously. The dogs would get confused. They're not confused," Willow said, already moving toward the weapons depot with 5 dogs flanking her like a personal security team. "They know exactly what they're doing. They were trained by the best." Trained by who? But Willow was already walking away, and the question hung unanswered in the air. The weapons depot sat at the far end of Fort Braxton, a reinforced concrete structure designed to survive direct artillery hits. If the bomb inside detonated, the building itself might contain some of the blast, but the shrapnel, the concussive wave, the secondary explosions from stored munitions, the death toll would be catastrophic. Willow moved through the facility with a familiarity that shouldn't have been possible for a woman who, according to her records, had never set foot inside the restricted zone. She navigated corridors and checkpoints without hesitation, the dogs around her clearing the path of any personnel who might slow their progress. "Ma'am," a young specialist called out as she passed, "this area is restricted. You can't—" Rex stepped in front of him, teeth bared. The specialist backed away without another word. General Webb followed at a distance, flanked by Fiona Pierce and a security detail. He had ordered them to observe but not interfere. Whatever was happening here, he needed to understand it before he could make tactical decisions. "She knows this building," Fiona said quietly. "Yes, she knows exactly where she's going. Yes. General, her file says she's never had security clearance beyond the veterinary clinic." "Her file," Webb said slowly, "may not be entirely accurate." They reached the main storage area at 1500 hours, exactly 30 minutes after the first alarm had sounded. The 10 dogs that had sprinted ahead were already there, forming a circle around a specific section of shelving, not barking, not agitating, just standing with absolute stillness, their eyes fixed on one particular crate among thousands. Willow approached the circle. The dogs parted for her like water around a stone. "There," she said, pointing at a nondescript metal container marked with standard ammunition codes. "The device is in there. It's on a timer. Based on the chemical signature the dogs detected, I'd estimate—" She paused, tilting her head as if listening to something. 3 to 4 minutes remaining. "How can you possibly know that? Different explosive compounds degrade at different rates. The dogs can smell the breakdown products. If I interpret their behavior correctly, the primary charge has been sweating for about 26 minutes. That means it was activated just before your alarm systems detected the intrusion signature." She spoke with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather, not the potential deaths of 200 people. "Bomb squad is 12 minutes out," Fiona reported, checking her communication device. "That's not fast enough," Willow said. She stepped toward the crate. "Ma'am, you can't just—" "General." Willow turned to look at Webb directly. "I need you to evacuate everyone from this building, right now, including your people. You're suggesting we leave you alone with an active explosive device. I'm suggesting you let me do my job. Your job is cleaning floors." Something flickered in Willow's eyes, something ancient and weary and impossibly strong. "No," she said softly, "that was my cover. My job has always been something else entirely." She turned back to the crate without waiting for his response. Her weathered hands, the hands everyone had assumed were only good for mopping and scrubbing, moved with surgical precision. She felt along the edges of the container, found the concealed release mechanisms, began the careful process of opening it without triggering secondary traps. "Everyone out," Webb ordered. "Now." The security detail retreated. Fiona hesitated. "Sir, we can't just leave her." "That wasn't a suggestion, Colonel." They pulled back to the depot entrance, close enough to observe but hopefully far enough to survive if things went wrong. Webb watched through the reinforced doorway as the old woman in the faded blue uniform worked with methodical calm. The dogs remained with her, all 10 of them, not retreating, not showing fear, staying exactly where their training had placed them, even if it meant dying alongside their handler. 2 minutes, someone called out from the security perimeter. Willow didn't respond. Her fingers found what they were looking for, and she began the delicate process of disconnecting wires from a detonator. 90 seconds. The device was more sophisticated than standard military ordnance. Custom work, the kind of bomb that required specialized knowledge to build, and even more specialized knowledge to disarm. 60 seconds. Willow's hands moved faster now, but still steady, still precise. She pulled a final wire, twisted a connection, and the soft electronic beeping that had been counting down to oblivion went silent. "Clear," she announced. The bomb disposal team arrived 8 minutes later. They found the device already safely disassembled, its components laid out in an organized pattern that their senior technician described as textbook perfect. "Who did this?" he asked, examining the work. General Webb looked toward the depot entrance, where Willow stood surrounded by 10 panting dogs, their tails wagging with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. "A veterinary assistant," he said slowly. "Apparently." The technician's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Sir, with respect, this disarmament technique is classified special operations material. I have only seen it used by people who officially don't exist." "I'm beginning to understand that." Webb walked toward Willow. The dogs parted for him this time, recognizing that their protective duty had evolved into something else. He stopped in front of her, studying her face with new eyes. The gray hair, the lined face, the calloused hands, all still there. But now he saw what was underneath: the steel in her spine, the tactical awareness in her gaze, the quiet competence of someone who had done impossible things and survived to tell about them. "Miss Thornton," he said formally, "on behalf of the United States Army, I need to thank you for your actions today. You saved 200 lives." "The dogs saved them, I just translated." "Nevertheless," he paused. "I believe we need to have a longer conversation about your background. Your real background. Perhaps somewhere private and secure." Willow nodded slowly. "After we find the person who planted that bomb." "You think they're still on base?" She glanced toward Rex, who had taken position at her right side. The dog's ears were swiveled toward the eastern edge of the compound, his body tense with focused attention. "I think," Willow said quietly, "that the dogs already know exactly where they are." The saboteur was found hiding in the communications building at 15:43 hours. A 34-year-old eye specialist named Bradley Chen, no relation to Dr. Iris Chen, who had worked at Fort Braxton for 6 years without raising a single red flag. The dogs cornered him in a server room, their combined presence creating an inescapable wall of teeth and muscle. He surrendered without resistance, his hands shaking so badly he could barely raise them above his head. "How did they find me?" he kept asking, as military police led him away. "The sensors couldn't track me, my signal masking was perfect. How did they know?" General Webb, watching the arrest from a distance, understood the answer, even if the saboteur didn't. No amount of electronic countermeasures could fool a dog's nose. No signal masking could hide the scent of fear hormones, the chemical traces of explosive compounds on clothing, the subtle physiological changes of a man carrying treasonous secrets. Technology had failed. Training had failed. But the dogs had known from the moment Bradley Chen walked onto the base that morning, with death hidden in his hands. And someone had understood what the dogs were trying to say. Webb turned to find Willow. She stood near the canine training yard, surrounded by all 30 dogs who had returned to their protective formation around her. Dr. Iris Chen stood nearby, speaking quietly with her. The conversation looked intense. He approached slowly, giving both women time to notice him and conclude their discussion. When he was still 10 feet away, Willow spoke without turning around. "Your approach vector is from the southeast. You're favoring your left leg slightly, probably an old injury that acts up in cold weather. And you had coffee with 2 sugars this morning, based on the residue scent on your uniform jacket." Webb stopped. "The dogs told you that?" "The dogs confirmed it. I noticed the coffee stain when you arrived at the training yard this morning." She turned to face him. "General, I believe you wanted to have a conversation." "I believe I do." He glanced at Iris. "Dr. Chen, would you excuse us?" "Actually, sir," Iris said quietly, "I think I should stay. There are things about my father's service that might be relevant to this conversation. Things I've kept secret for a long time." "Such as?" Iris took a deep breath. such as the fact that I recognized Ms. Thornton on her first day at this facility. Not her face specifically, but the way she moved, the way she handled the dogs. My father described it to me once. He said there was only one person in the world who could make military working dogs respond like that. A woman he called the Shepherd. Webb's eyes narrowed. And you never reported this? Reported what, sir? That an old woman who mops floors reminded me of a bedtime story my father told me when I was 8 years old. That she seemed familiar in a way I couldn't articulate to anyone who hadn't seen what my father saw? Iris shook her head. I didn't know for certain, not until today, not until I watched her with those dogs. But you suspected. I hoped. Iris's voice cracked slightly. My father died 7 years ago, General, but until his last breath, he talked about the woman who saved his life, the woman who came back into a kill zone 3 times to pull out wounded soldiers while under fire, the woman who used her dogs like a weapon and a shield and a miracle all at once. She looked at Willow, tears forming in her eyes. He always believed she survived somehow. He could never accept that she was really gone, and I think part of me wanted to believe he was right. Willow was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched Iris's shoulder with unexpected gentleness. Your father, she said softly, was Sergeant First Class Henry Chen, 3rd Ranger Battalion. He took 2 rounds in the chest during the Kandahar ambush and still managed to provide covering fire while I evacuated the wounded. He was one of the bravest men I ever served with. Iris's tears spilled over. You remember him? I remember all of them. Every soldier I ever brought home. Willow's voice was quiet, and everyone I couldn't. General Webb stood in silence, watching the exchange. 20 years of classified files. 20 years of official reports confirming death. 20 years of a ghost story that special operations veterans whispered about in bars and barracks, never quite believing it could be true. And here she was, the Shepherd. Alive, older, invisible, but very much alive. We're about to reach the moment everything changes. But first, if you're on the edge of your seat right now, please like this video and share it with someone who loves military stories. Every like helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. Now, let's see what happens when they finally discover who Willow Thornton really is. I need to make a phone call, Webb said abruptly. He stepped away, pulling out a secure communication device. The call connected in 3 rings to a number that officially didn't exist, routed through encryption layers that would have made the NSA jealous. This is Webb, authorization code 77 Alpha Tango 9. I need a level 7 file unsealed. Pause. Ghost Pack Protocol, Generation 3. Yes, I'm aware of the classification level. Yes, I understand the implications. A longer pause. Put me through to the secretary. Tell him the Shepherd might still be alive. While the general made his calls and the base slowly returned to something approaching normal operations, Captain Derek Hollis stood at the edge of the training yard, watching Willow with the dogs. His world had been thoroughly shattered over the past 2 hours, and he was still trying to pick up the pieces. 15 years. He had spent 15 years becoming the best military dog handler he could be, studying every technique, mastering every command, rising to lead the most advanced canine program in the Army. And this woman, this cleaning lady he had dismissed and mocked and ignored, had just demonstrated a level of control over military working dogs that he couldn't have achieved in 100 lifetimes of training. He approached her slowly, aware that 30 pairs of canine eyes were tracking his every movement. Ma'am, he said, his voice rough with emotions he couldn't quite name, I owe you an apology. Willow looked at him with those ancient eyes. For what specifically? The question hit harder than he expected. For what? For kicking her bucket? For calling her old lady? For dismissing her as worthless? For assuming that someone in a janitor's uniform couldn't possibly know anything important? For all of it, he said finally. For every time I treated you like you didn't matter. For every insult. For every dismissal. For being so arrogant that I couldn't see what was right in front of my face. Willow studied him for a long moment. You're not the first person to underestimate me, Captain. You won't be the last. But I should have known better. I'm supposed to be an expert in reading behavior, in understanding body language, and I missed every single sign. You saw what you expected to see, an old woman in a blue uniform. Someone beneath your notice, she shrugged. Most people do. Is that why you did it? The disguise, I mean. To test whether people would look past the surface? Partly. Willow's gaze drifted toward the dogs, who had settled into relaxed positions around her feet. I also needed to find something. Something I couldn't find while drawing attention to myself. Find what? She didn't answer immediately. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. The dogs you've been training, the ones in this program, they're special, not just in their abilities, but in their lineage, their training, their nature. Do you know where they came from? Various breeding programs, standard military procurement channels, and you never wondered why they seemed different from other military working dogs? Never questioned why they learned faster, responded better, showed more tactical awareness than anything else you'd worked with? Derek's brow furrowed. He had noticed those things. Everyone had, but he'd attributed it to good breeding, good nutrition, good training. They're Generation 3, Willow said quietly. The third iteration of a program I started over 25 years ago. A program that was supposed to have died with me in Kandahar. But you're not dead. No, I'm not. She met his eyes. But someone wanted me to be. Someone went to great lengths to fake my death, destroy my program, and scatter my dogs to the four corners of the military. I've spent 3 years trying to figure out who and why. Is that why you came here? These dogs specifically? They were the last piece of the puzzle, the only surviving group from the original bloodline. I needed to see them, to understand what had happened to them, to determine if they remembered. Remembered what? Willow raised her hand and made a gesture, just a small one. Nothing that Derek could have interpreted on his own. All 30 dogs raised their right paws simultaneously, held them there for exactly 3 seconds, then lowered them in perfect unison. They remembered everything, Willow said. Every command, every formation, every tactical response I ever taught them. It's genetic, bred into their DNA, reinforced through training that starts before they can even open their eyes. That's not possible, and yet you just saw it happen. Derek was quiet for a long time, processing information that challenged everything he thought he knew about dog behavior and military training. Finally, he asked the question that had been burning in his mind. The person who planted the bomb, was he connected to whatever happened to you? Almost certainly. So, someone is trying to destroy this program, your program, and they've been doing it for 20 years. Longer than that. Willow's eyes grew distant. The attack on my unit in Kandahar wasn't random. It wasn't Taliban. It was precisely planned and executed by someone with intimate knowledge of our operations. Someone who wanted Ghostpack eliminated and wanted me dead. Do you know who? I have suspicions, but no proof. She looked back at him. Yet, Master Sergeant Amber Voss appeared at the edge of the training yard at 1600 hours. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. She walked toward Willow with the hesitant steps of someone approaching a minefield, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. "Miss Thornton," she said formally, I want to... She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. Willow waited in silence. "I was horrible to you," Amber finally managed. "Every single day for 3 years. I called you names. I humiliated you in front of other personnel. I treated you like you were worthless." Her voice cracked. "And the whole time you were someone who what? Someone who matters, someone important, someone who saved 200 lives today while I was too busy mocking you to see what was right in front of me." Amber pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. A resignation letter, Willow realized, handwritten, probably drafted in the past 15 minutes. "I'm not fit to serve," Amber said. "I don't deserve to wear this uniform. I've spent years bullying people I thought were beneath me, and it turns out I was the one who was beneath everyone all along." Willow took the paper, read it over carefully, then, with deliberate slowness, tore it in half. "Ma'am, what are you—" "I don't want your resignation, Sergeant Voss." Willow met her eyes with a gaze that was firm but not unkind. "I want something harder than that. Anything, whatever penance you think is appropriate. I want you to change." Willow let the torn pieces of paper fall, not because you got caught, not because you're afraid of consequences, but because you've genuinely realized that every single person you meet, regardless of their job title or appearance or social status, deserves basic human respect. Amber stared at her. That's it? That's everything." Willow's voice softened slightly. I've seen what happens when people with power forget that those beneath them are still human beings. I've seen it in war zones and government offices and military bases just like this one. The casual cruelty, the institutional blindness, the small daily acts of disrespect that add up to something much darker over time. She stepped closer to Amber, close enough to speak quietly. You have a choice now. You can spend the rest of your career feeling guilty about how you treated the old cleaning lady, or you can use this moment to become someone better, to look at every person you meet and wonder what secrets they might be carrying, what battles they might be fighting, what they might teach you if you just stopped assuming you already knew everything. Amber swallowed hard. How do I do that? How do I change something I've been doing my whole life? One interaction at a time, one moment at a time. Every time you're about to dismiss someone, ask yourself why. Every time you're about to mock someone, imagine who they might really be. Willow glanced at the dogs, then back at Amber. The dogs don't care about rank or title or uniform. They respond to essence, to character, to who someone truly is beneath all the surface noise. And they recognized you, all of them, immediately. Because I've been the same person my entire life, regardless of what I was wearing or what job I was pretending to have. Willow's eyes held Amber's. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air between them. Amber couldn't answer, but Willow saw something change in her eyes, a crack in the armor, a possibility of growth. It would have to be enough, for now. Sergeant Caleb Reeves approached at 16:15 hours, his earlier technological arrogance replaced by something approaching humility. He still carried his tablet, but he held it differently now, less like a weapon, more like a tool he wasn't entirely sure how to use. "Ma'am," he said, "I owe you an apology as well. You're the third one in the past hour. I imagine there'll be more." He shifted his weight awkwardly. "I spent the last 2 hours reviewing everything I thought I knew about military working dog training. Every protocol, every research paper, every technological advancement of the past 20 years. And none of it explains what you can do. None of it even comes close." He looked at the dogs with new eyes. "I based my entire career on the assumption that technology could eventually replace intuition, that sensors and algorithms and electronic commands could achieve better results than whatever this is. And now I'm not sure what I believe, except that I was wrong about you, wrong about everything, really." Willow considered him for a moment. "Your technology isn't useless, Sergeant. The sensors, the monitoring systems, the data analysis, all of it has value. But technology can only measure what it's designed to measure. It can't detect loyalty. It can't quantify trust. It can't analyze the bond between a handler and their animal in any meaningful way." She nodded toward Rex, who lay at her feet with complete contentment. "These dogs don't obey me because of ultrasonic frequencies or electronic compliance training. They obey me because they believe in me, because I've earned their trust over decades of consistent, honest relationship building. Can that be taught? Anything can be taught to someone willing to learn." Willow paused. "The question is whether you're willing to let go of your assumptions long enough to actually hear what I'm saying." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he closed his tablet and tucked it under his arm. "I would like to learn," he said, "if you're willing to teach." "We'll see." Willow's expression was unreadable. "The first lesson is patience. The second is humility. Most people wash out before they complete either one. I understand. You don't. But you might, eventually." Lieutenant Colonel Fiona Pierce arrived last, at 16:30 hours. Unlike the others, she didn't approach Willow directly. She stopped at the edge of the training yard, maintaining formal military distance, and waited to be acknowledged. Willow looked up. "Colonel Pierce? Ms. Thornton?" Fiona's voice was carefully controlled. "General Webb has informed me of the preliminary findings regarding your background. I'm told the full file is being unsealed as we speak. I'm aware. I wanted to express..." Fiona paused, clearly uncomfortable with what she was about to say. "I wanted to acknowledge that my earlier treatment of you was inappropriate. I made assumptions based on your apparent status rather than gathering all available information. That's a failure of intelligence analysis that could have had serious consequences." "It almost did." "Yes." Fiona's jaw tightened. "If you hadn't been here, If you hadn't understood what the dogs were trying to tell us, we would have evacuated in the wrong direction and left 200 people vulnerable to the blast, probably. So, I need to ask, what would you have done if we had removed you from the secure area as I ordered? If my people had escorted you out before you could intervene? Willow considered the question. I would have found another way. I always do. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. When lives are at stake, you don't stop trying just because someone orders you to. You find another path, another approach, another angle of attack. Fiona was silent for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. I've seen your classified file, she said. The real one. General Webb shared the basic outline while the full records are being retrieved. The missions you ran, the soldiers you saved, the impossible situations you walked out of when no one else could. Is there a point to this review, Colonel? The point is that I've spent my entire career following protocols and procedures, doing things by the book, and you've spent yours breaking every rule that got in the way of doing what was right. Fiona's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. I'm not sure which approach is correct, but I'm beginning to think the answer might be somewhere in the middle. Progress, Willow said simply. Perhaps. Fiona straightened to attention. General Webb has requested your presence in the command center at 1700 hours. There are matters to discuss regarding the saboteur's origins and the broader implications of today's events. I expected as much. There's one more thing, Fiona hesitated. The General has also authorized me to extend an invitation. The Pentagon has been briefed on your survival. They want to offer you a formal position, senior advisor to all K-9 operations in the United States military, full rank restoration, complete access to every program you've been monitoring from the shadows. Willow was quiet for a long moment. The offer represented everything she had once been, everything she had walked away from, everything she had spent 3 years hiding from. I'll consider it, she said finally. General Webb expected you'd say that. A hint of a smile crossed Fiona's stern features. He also said to tell you that the offer comes with one specific condition, which is, you'd have to stop mopping floors. For the first time since the crisis began, something that might have been amusement flickered across Willow's weathered face. That might be the most difficult part of the arrangement, she said. Corporal Levi Martinez waited until the senior officers had departed before approaching Willow. He still held the dog tags he had found earlier, the ones with the wolf's head insignia that didn't match any known military unit. Ma'am, he said quietly, I have something that belongs to you. He extended his palm, the metal tags glinting in the afternoon light. Willow looked at them, but didn't reach out to take them. Where did you find those? On the ground, during the confrontation earlier. They must have fallen when Captain Hollis grabbed you. You could have given them to General Webb, to the investigators. They would have been interested in this physical evidence. I could have. Levi met her eyes. But something told me they should go back to you first. Why? Because the dogs trust you, and I've learned to trust the dogs. He took a breath. Also because you looked at me earlier, during the chaos. You looked at me like you recognized something. Willow was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out and took the dog tags, her fingers closing around them with the practiced grip of someone who had held them thousands of times before. These tags were issued in 1998, the original Ghost Pack insignia, before the program was officially classified and all physical evidence was supposed to be destroyed. She turned them over, studying the worn metal. I thought I'd lost them in Kandahar. I thought they'd been destroyed with everything else. How did they end up here? I don't know. That's one of the many questions I'm going to have to find answers to. She looked up at him. You asked why I recognized you. Do you really want to know? Yes, ma'am. The dogs chose you. Levi blinked. I'm sorry. From the first day you arrived at this facility, the first time you walked onto the training grounds, Willow gestured toward Rex, who had been watching their conversation with alert interest. They started watching you differently, tracking your movements, positioning themselves closer to you during exercises, testing you in small ways you probably never even noticed. Testing me for what? To see if you were worthy. Worthy of what? Willow considered him carefully. 24 years old, fresh from training, humble enough to ask questions instead of assuming he had answers. Observant enough to notice what others missed, brave enough to approach her when everyone else was still recovering from their shattered assumptions. Ghost Pack needs a new handler, she said quietly. The original team is gone. I'm too old for field operations, but the program can continue if there's someone capable of carrying it forward. And you think that's me? The dogs think that's you. I've learned to trust their judgment. Levi stared at her, trying to process what he was hearing. 24 hours ago, he had been a junior handler worried about passing his next evaluation. Now, a legendary figure from military history was suggesting he might be destined for something much larger. I'm honored, but I'm not qualified for. You're not. Yet. Willow cut him off. Training takes years. The bond takes decades. You'd have to dedicate your entire life to this program, knowing that most of what you do will never be acknowledged, that your successes will be classified and your failures will be buried. That sounds lonely. It is. Her eyes grew distant. But the dogs make up for it. They're the most loyal companions you'll ever have, the most honest relationship you will ever experience. They don't care about your rank or your medals or your reputation. They only care about who you are when no one else is watching. Levi looked at Rex. The big Malinois was watching him with an intensity that felt almost evaluative, as if the dog was waiting to see what decision he would make. If I said yes, Levi said slowly, what would happen? Training would begin immediately. Long hours, difficult challenges, more failures than successes in the early stages. Willow paused. And you'd have to keep everything secret, even from your family, even from your friends. The program exists in the shadows, and everyone connected to it has to be comfortable living there. Like you did, for 3 years, pretending to be someone you weren't. Like I did for most of my life. Her voice carried a weight of decades. The question isn't whether you can handle the work, Corporal. It's whether you can handle the isolation, the invisibility, the constant pressure of carrying secrets that could never be shared. Levi was quiet for a long time, watching the dogs, thinking about everything he had witnessed today. The power of their obedience, the precision of their formations, the absolute trust they placed in this woman who had hidden among them for 3 years, watching and waiting and planning. Can I think about it? He finally asked. Take all the time you need. Willow's expression softened slightly. But know that once you make this choice, there's no going back. This isn't a job. It's a calling, and it will consume everything you are. You make it sound like a sacrifice. It is. She looked at the 30 dogs surrounding them, each one a living weapon forged through years of specialized training. But some sacrifices are worth making, some callings are worth answering, and some legacies are worth carrying forward, even when the cost is everything you thought your life would be. The sun was beginning to set over Fort Braxton, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed as military police processed the captured saboteur. Somewhere else, General Webb was on the phone with Pentagon officials, explaining how a woman everyone had assumed was dead had just saved 200 lives and neutralized a terrorist threat. And here, in the training yard, surrounded by 30 elite military working dogs, 2 people stood at a crossroads that would shape the future of a program most of the world didn't know existed. I'll think about it, Levi said again. Good. Willow started walking toward the command center, Rex falling into step beside her. And Corporal? Yes, ma'am? Whatever you decide, keep those observation skills sharp. Today you notice things that experienced handlers missed. That's rare. That's valuable. Don't lose it. She walked away without looking back, leaving Levi alone with 29 dogs who seemed to be watching him with newfound interest, as if they knew something about his future that he hadn't figured out yet. The command center of Fort Braxton hummed with barely contained chaos when Willow arrived at 1700 hours. Screens displayed satellite imagery, threat assessments, and communication intercepts. Officers spoke in urgent tones into secure phones. The air crackled with the energy of a crisis being managed, and questions demanding answers. General Webb stood at the center of it all, a calm eye in the hurricane of activity. He noticed Willow's arrival immediately and crossed the room to meet her. The file has been fully unsealed, he said without preamble. I've read everything. All 12 missions, all 107 confirmed saves, all the details about Kandahar. Then you know what I was. I know what you are, he corrected her gently. The woman in those files didn't die. She just went underground. The question is why. Willow looked around the command center, taking in the faces of the personnel, the screens full of intelligence data, the complex web of military power surrounding her. Do you have somewhere more private, General? The answer to that question isn't something I want floating around an open room. Webb nodded, and led her to a secure briefing chamber adjacent to the main command center. Soundproofed walls, electronic countermeasures, the kind of room where secrets went to be kept. Once the door sealed behind them, he turned to face her. "Speak freely." Willow took a seat at the briefing table, her weathered hands folded in front of her. For a moment, she was silent, collecting thoughts that had been brewing for 20 years. "Kandahar wasn't a random ambush," she began. "The enemy knew exactly where we would be, exactly when we would arrive, exactly how to neutralize our dogs before they could warn us of the threat. Intelligence leak? Worse, active betrayal. Someone inside the program sold us out. Someone who knew the Ghost Pack protocols intimately enough to design countermeasures specifically for our animals." Webb's expression hardened. "Do you know who?" "I have suspicions, no proof, but today's saboteur gives me a lead I didn't have before. Bradley Chen, the IT specialist. He's not working alone. The device he planted was too sophisticated for a simple insider threat. The countermeasures, the timing, the target selection, all of it suggests a larger organization, one that's been tracking Ghost Pack for decades. Tracking it for what purpose?" Willow met his eyes. "To replicate it, to steal the techniques, the training methods, the breeding protocols, and to eliminate anyone who might interfere with that theft." The implications hung in the air between them. 20 years of shadow warfare, 20 years of someone hunting the remnants of a program that officially didn't exist, trying to recreate its capabilities while destroying its original creators. "The sabotage today," Webb said slowly, "it wasn't about destroying the base. No, it was about destroying evidence, and possibly about killing me if they knew I was here." Willow's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing her own potential assassination was simply another tactical consideration. The bomb was positioned to destroy the K9 facility specifically, the dogs, the medical records, everything that connected this generation to the original Ghost Pack bloodline. They knew you were here, somehow. They suspected. Bradley Chen has been at this facility for 6 years. Plenty of time to notice an old woman who seemed to know too much about military working dogs. Plenty of time to report that observation to his handlers. Who are his handlers? That's what I need to find out. Willow stood, moving to the window that overlooked the darkening base. The interrogation will tell us something, but men like Chen are usually compartmentalized. They know their immediate controllers, but not the larger organization. Then how do we trace it back? We follow the money, the technology, the breeding records. She turned to face him. And we use the one asset they can't prepare for, the dogs. The dogs. They can detect deception at a biological level. Fear, stress, the chemical signatures of lying. If we bring Chen's associates in for questioning, with the right animals present, we'll know immediately who's involved. Webb nodded slowly. That's why you revealed yourself today. Not just to stop the bomb, to position yourself for the next phase of this investigation. I didn't plan for it to happen this way. But yes, now that my cover is blown, I might as well use the attention strategically. You've been playing a longer game than any of us realized. I've been playing the only game that matters. Willow's eyes grew distant, finding out who murdered my team, who betrayed everything we built, and making sure they pay for it. Webb studied her for a long moment, the gray hair, the lined face, the quiet intensity that burned beneath the surface of her unassuming exterior. "The Pentagon wants you back in official capacity," he said. "Full restoration of rank, unlimited resources, whatever you need to finish this investigation." I saw the offer. What's your answer? Willow was silent for a long moment. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of sweeping floors and being mocked and watching from the shadows. 3 years of patience, all leading to this moment. "I'll accept," she said finally, "on one condition." "Name it." "Corporal Levi Martinez receives accelerated promotion and assignment to the Ghost Pack training program. He's the future of this unit. The dogs have already chosen him." "The dogs chose him?" "Their judgment is better than any evaluation board I've ever seen. If they trust him, I trust him." Webb considered this. A junior corporal elevated on the recommendation of military working dogs. It wasn't standard procedure. It wasn't even close to standard procedure. But nothing about today had been standard. "Done," he said. "What else?" "Access to Bradley Chen's interrogation, full oversight of the investigation, and authorization to pursue this wherever it leads, regardless of political considerations or diplomatic complications. You're asking for a blank check. I'm asking for the tools to finish a job that should have been completed 20 years ago. Willow's voice hardened. Someone out there has my dogs. The original Ghost Pack animals, or their descendants. They have been using them for 2 decades for purposes I can only imagine. I want them back, and I want the people responsible held accountable. Your dogs? From Kandahar? 5 of them survived the ambush. I was told they were killed in the secondary explosion. I believed that for 20 years. Her jaw tightened. But the intelligence fragments I've gathered suggest otherwise. Someone extracted them. Someone kept them alive. Someone has been breeding from that original stock ever since. Webb processed this new information. An underground program built on stolen military assets. A 2-decade conspiracy that reached into the heart of the armed forces. And at the center of it all, a woman who had faked her own death to stay 1 step ahead of her hunters. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, this goes beyond a simple investigation. We're talking about a counterintelligence operation that could take years. It will take as long as it takes. Willow's voice was calm but absolute. I've waited 20 years for this chance. I can wait as long as necessary to see it through. And if the trail leads somewhere you don't expect, somewhere you might not want it to go, then I'll go there anyway. She met his eyes without flinching. The truth is the truth, General, whether it's comfortable or not, whether it implicates allies or enemies. I learned a long time ago that lies are more dangerous than any weapon, and the only defense against them is absolute commitment to reality. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Welcome back to the Army, Colonel Thornton. It's been too long. Willow hesitated for just a moment before taking it. Colonel, your original rank before you died. Restored effective immediately. He smiled slightly, though I imagine it's going to take some getting used to. After 3 years of being called the floor-mopping lady. Everything takes getting used to, General. Willow released his hand and turned toward the door. The question is whether we're willing to do the work of adaptation. Where are you going? To see my dogs. To prepare them for what comes next. She paused at the threshold. And to have a conversation with Corporal Martinez. If he's going to inherit Ghost Pack, he needs to understand exactly what he's getting into. And what is he getting into? Willow looked back over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. A war that started before he was born, a legacy that demands everything, and a family of 30 animals who will love him completely, protect him absolutely, and challenge him to become something greater than he ever imagined possible. She walked out without another word, leaving General Webb alone with the weight of everything he had learned. In the hallway outside, Rex was waiting for her. The big Malinois fell into step beside her without needing any command, his presence as natural and automatic as breathing. Time to begin the next chapter, old friend, Willow murmured as they walked toward the K9 facility. Rex's tail wagged once, a small gesture, but it said everything that needed to be said. The shepherd was back, and the hunt was about to begin. The sun had fully set by the time Willow returned to the K9 training yard. Floodlights cast harsh white pools across the concrete, creating islands of brightness in the gathering darkness. The 30 dogs had been moved to a secure holding area adjacent to the main facility, but they stirred with visible excitement when they sensed her approach. Rex was the first to greet her, pressing his massive head against her palm with the kind of devotion that couldn't be faked or commanded. The other 29 followed in order of pack hierarchy, each one touching her briefly before settling into their positions. Corporal Levi Martinez stood at the edge of the holding area, watching the ritual with undisguised wonder. They do that every time you come back, he observed, even if you've only been gone for a few minutes. It's a bonding protocol, Willow explained, running her fingers through Rex's thick fur. Reaffirmation of pack structure. They're confirming that I'm still their leader, and I'm confirming that I still accept the responsibility. You make it sound like a contract. It is a contract, the most sacred one I've ever signed. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the harsh floodlights. Have you thought about what we discussed? Levi had been thinking about nothing else for the past 2 hours. The offer, the responsibility, the weight of carrying forward a legacy that most people didn't know existed. I have questions, he said. Ask them. The original Ghost Pack, the one from Kandahar. You said 5 dogs survived. What happened to them? Willow's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a shadow passing behind her eyes, a wound that had never fully healed. For 20 years, I believed they were dead. The official report said they were killed in the secondary explosion that supposedly took my life. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But intelligence I have gathered over the past 3 years suggests otherwise. Someone extracted them before the final blast. Someone kept them alive. Who? That's what I've been trying to find out. The trail is cold, deliberately obscured. Whoever took them has resources and expertise that rival anything in the official military structure. And you think today's saboteur is connected to them? I'm certain of it. Bradley Chen didn't plant that bomb on his own initiative. He was following orders from someone who knows about Ghost Pack, knows about the breeding program, knows that these 30 dogs represent the last surviving link to the original bloodline. Levi absorbed this information, fitting it together with everything else he had witnessed today. A conspiracy spanning 2 decades, a shadow organization hunting the remnants of a classified program, and at the center of it all, a woman who had spent 3 years hiding in plain sight, waiting for her moment. If I join this program, he said slowly, I'm joining that fight too. Not just the training, not just the dogs, the whole war. Yes, and you can't tell me who the enemy is because you don't know. I know pieces, fragments, enough to be dangerous, not enough to be decisive. Willow stood, brushing dust from her faded uniform. But that's about to change. With official resources behind me, with access to intelligence I couldn't reach before, I can finally start connecting the dots. What if the dots connect to something you can't fight? Something bigger than one person and 30 dogs? Willow smiled. It was the first genuine smile Levi had seen from her. Not warm exactly, more like the expression of a wolf recognizing a worthy opponent. Then I'll need help, she said. I'll need someone younger, faster, someone the dogs trust, someone who can carry the mission forward if I can't. The implication hung in the air between them. You're not just offering me training, Levi realized. You're offering me succession. I'm offering you a choice. The same choice I was offered 30 years ago by my own mentor. The same choice that defined everything I became. She met his eyes directly. Take it or leave it, but know that once you accept, there's no going back. This becomes your life, your purpose, your family. Levi looked at the 30 dogs arranged around them, Rex watching with alert interest. Storm, the anxious Malinois that Willow had calmed with a simple hand gesture. The others, each one a living weapon forged through years of specialized training, each one utterly devoted to the woman standing before him. He thought about his parents back in Texas, who still believed he was just a regular dog handler at a regular military facility. He thought about the girlfriend who had broken up with him 6 months ago, unable to understand why he couldn't talk about his work. He thought about all the normal futures he had imagined for himself, all the conventional paths he might have walked. And then he thought about what he had witnessed today, the power, the precision, the absolute trust between handler and animal that transcended anything he had ever experienced in his training. I'm in, he said quietly. Willow studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Good. Training begins at 0500 tomorrow. Don't be late. She turned to walk away, but Levi's voice stopped her. Ma'am, one more question. Yes? Why me? Out of everyone on this base, out of every handler you could have chosen, why did the dogs pick me? Willow considered the question. In truth, she wasn't entirely sure of the answer herself. The dog's judgment was more intuitive than logical, more instinctual than analytical. They sensed things that humans couldn't articulate, but she had a theory. When you first arrived at this facility, she said, what was the first thing you did? Levi thought back. 3 months ago, nervous, eager, determined to make a good impression. I went to the kennels. Before even reporting to my commanding officer, I wanted to see the dogs. And what did you do there? Nothing, really. Just walked along the kennels, let them smell me, talked to them a little, introduced myself. Most new handlers spend their first day meeting the human personnel, building relationships with other soldiers, establishing their place in the hierarchy. Willow's voice softened. You went straight to the dogs, as if they were the only relationships that mattered. They are. I mean, that's why I'm here. That's why I joined this program. Exactly. Willow turned back to face him fully. The dogs recognize that. They know when someone sees them as partners rather than tools, when someone values their judgment rather than just their obedience. That's rare. Rarer than you might think. She walked toward the facility exit, Rex falling into step beside her, as naturally as breathing. Get some sleep, Corporal. Tomorrow, everything changes. The interrogation of Bradley Chen began at 2100 hours in a secure facility adjacent to the base stockade. General Webb had assembled a team of counterintelligence specialists, but at Willow's request, 3 of the Ghost Pack dogs were also present. Chen sat handcuffed to a metal table, his earlier defiance crumbling under the weight of multiple federal charges: terrorism, sabotage, attempted mass murder, espionage, each one carrying enough prison time to ensure he would never see freedom again. But it was the dogs that truly broke him. Every time he attempted a lie, every time he tried to deflect or mislead, the 3 Malinois surrounding him would react. Low growls, ears flattening, teeth baring. They could smell the stress hormones flooding his system whenever he deviated from the truth, and he knew they could smell it. I don't know who they are, he insisted for the 3rd time. I only ever dealt with one contact, a woman. She never gave me her name. We communicated through encrypted channels. One of the dogs growled. I swear I'm telling the truth. She recruited me 6 years ago, offered money, lots of money, said all I had to do was monitor the K9 program and report anything unusual. What kind of unusual? Willow asked from her position in the corner of the room. Chen's eyes darted toward her. Recognition flickered across his face. He knew who she was now. Everyone did. You, he said. She was looking for you. She knew you weren't really dead. She knew you'd surface eventually. How did she know? I don't know all the details. Chen's voice trembled. But she mentioned something about the dogs. The original ones. She said they would lead you back eventually, that you couldn't stay away from them forever. Willow felt her blood run cold. Whoever was behind this knew her better than she had realized, knew her psychology, knew her weaknesses, knew that the bond between handler and dog was something she could never truly abandon. The bomb today, General Z-Webb interjected, was that her order? Yes. She contacted me 3 days ago, said the timeline had accelerated, said there was a threat to the program that needed to be eliminated immediately. What threat? Chen looked directly at Willow. You were the threat. She said you'd gotten too close, that you were about to find something you weren't supposed to find. Find what? I don't know. The dogs growled again, and Chen flinched violently. I really don't know. She only told me what I needed to complete my mission. Plant the device, destroy the K9 facility, eliminate any evidence connecting the current dogs to their ancestors. Their ancestors, Willow repeated. The original Ghost Pack dogs. She called them the Foundation stock, said they were more valuable than anything else in the entire military, said whoever controlled them controlled the future of special operations. General Webb exchanged a glance with Willow. The implications were staggering. A shadow organization that had been breeding from the original Ghost Pack dogs for 2 decades, developing their own version of the program outside official oversight. This woman who contacted you, Webb said, describe her voice, any details you remember. American accent, educated, calm, even when giving orders that would kill people. Chen swallowed hard. She sounded like someone who had done this before, many times. Any code names? Any identifying information? She called herself Athena. That's all I know. The dogs remained calm. Whatever else Chen might be hiding, he was telling the truth about this. Willow stepped forward, leaning close enough that Chen could see every line on her weathered face. Athena is going to find out that her bomb failed, that I'm still alive, that the dog survived. What do you think she'll do next? Chen's face went pale. She'll try again. She never fails. She told me that once. Said she had been perfecting her methods for 20 years. Said no target had ever escaped her twice. Then I'd better make sure I'm not a target anymore. Willow straightened up. I'd better become the hunter instead of the hunted. She walked out of the interrogation room without looking back. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of briefings, planning sessions, and secure communications with Pentagon officials. By midnight, the outline of a counterintelligence operation had begun to take shape. Task forces were being assembled, resources allocated, a net was being cast for the mysterious Athena and whatever organization she represented. But Willow knew that official channels could only accomplish so much. Whoever had been running this shadow operation for 20 years had obviously penetrated the military structure at multiple levels. They had known about Ghost Pack, known about her survival, known exactly when and where to strike, which meant they had sources inside the very institutions now hunting them. She was standing alone in the canine facility at 0200 hours when she heard footsteps approaching. Not military boots, something softer, more deliberate. The dogs didn't react with alarm, which meant they recognized the approaching figure. Willow turned to find a man emerging from the shadows near the facility entrance. Tall, gray-haired, moving with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades operating in dangerous environments. "Hello, Shepard," he said quietly. Willow's hand moved instinctively toward the weapon she wasn't carrying. Then recognition flooded through her, and she froze. "Silas?" Colonel Silas Bear Harrison stepped fully into the light. 61 years old, retired. Officially, at least. He had been her second in command during the Ghost Pack's operational years, her closest friend. The man who had helped her fake her death in Kandahar and disappear into the shadows. The man she hadn't seen or contacted in 20 years. "You look good for a dead woman," he said with a faint smile. "You look terrible for a living one." Willow studied his face, reading the years of stress and secrecy written there. "What are you doing here, Silas? How did you know to come?" "I've been monitoring the situation from a distance. When word reached me about what happened today, I knew I had to make contact." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "There are things you need to know. Things I should have told you years ago." "Such as?" Silas reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, black, unmarked, the kind of document container that carried secrets capable of destroying careers and ending lives. "Open it," he said. Willow took the folder with steady hands. Inside were photographs, 5 of them, each showing a dog with distinctive markings she would have recognized anywhere. "These are the dogs," she breathed, "the original 5, from Kandahar. Taken 6 months ago at a facility in Eastern Europe. They're alive, Willow, all of them, and they've been used to breed over 200 offspring in the past 20 years. The photographs shook slightly in her hands. 20 years of believing they were dead. 20 years of mourning them alongside the human teammates she had lost, and now this. How? Her voice cracked. How did they survive? I saw the explosion. I saw the facility destroyed. Because I got them out. Silas's voice was heavy with old guilt. Before the final blast. I had about 30 seconds of warning, and I used them to extract the dogs rather than the equipment or the records. You saved them, but then why did you let me believe they were dead? Why did you disappear without telling me? Because I was compromised. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Someone had gotten to me, Willow. Someone who knew about the program and wanted the dogs for themselves. They gave me a choice, help them acquire the Foundation stock or watch them kill everyone connected to Ghost Pack. You included. So you gave them my dogs to save my life. I gave them the dogs and then spent 20 years trying to undo that mistake. Silas's voice hardened. I've been tracking them ever since. Building intelligence, identifying the network, waiting for the right moment to bring you back in. The right moment? I've been hiding for 2 decades while you played shadow games with the people who destroyed everything we built. I was protecting you. The only way I knew how. Willow wanted to rage at him, wanted to scream about betrayal and lost years and trust that had been shattered. But beneath the anger, beneath the hurt, she recognized something else in his face. Exhaustion, regret, the weight of secrets that had been carried alone for far too long. Who are they, Silas? Who took my dogs? A private military organization called Prometheus Holdings. Officially, they're a defense contractor specializing in security services. Unofficially, they've been building their own version of Ghost Pack for the past 20 years using stolen protocols and the Foundation stock bloodlines. And Athena? Silas's expression darkened. Their head of operations, former CIA, former military intelligence, one of the most dangerous people I've ever encountered. She's been running the program since its inception, and she's turned the dogs into something. He paused, searching for the right word. Something darker than what we ever intended. What do you mean? Ghost Pack was designed for rescue operations, recovery, protection. Athena has trained her dogs for assassination, infiltration, eliminating targets without leaving traces. His voice dropped. She's weaponized everything you built and twisted it into something monstrous. Willow felt something cold settle in her chest. Her dogs, her methods, her life's work, all corrupted and turned toward death rather than salvation. Where is this facility? The one in the photographs? That's the problem. They move constantly. never stay in one location for more than a few months. I've tracked them across 4 continents in the past 2 years, and every time I get close, they vanish. Then we need better intelligence. We need to draw them out. That's why I'm here. Silas reached into his jacket again and produced a secure communication device. 3 days ago, I received a message through a channel I thought was completely dead. Someone inside Prometheus Holdings wants to defect. Someone who has access to everything: locations, personnel, breeding records, operational plans. Who? A handler, one of Athena's protégés who apparently had a crisis of conscience after seeing what the dogs were being used for. He handed her the device. They want to meet, but only with you, only with the shepherd. Willow looked at the device in her hand. A lifeline to answers she had been seeking for decades, or a trap designed to eliminate the last remaining threat to Athena's operation. It could be bait, she said. Probably is. Athena would expect me to respond to any offer that promised information about the original dogs. Almost certainly. Going in would be walking into the most obvious ambush in history. Without question. Silas met her eyes. Which is exactly why you're going to do it anyway. He knew her too well. Knew that no threat, no danger, no logical argument would stop her from pursuing the dogs she had trained and loved and mourned for 20 years. When is the meeting? 72 hours. Location to be transmitted once you confirm acceptance. Willow turned to look at the 30 dogs in the holding area behind her. Rex watched her with unwavering attention, as if he understood every word of the conversation. Perhaps he did. These animals had been bred for intelligence that pushed the boundaries of what anyone thought possible. I'll need support, she said finally. Not official military. Too easy to compromise. I need people I can trust absolutely. I assumed you might say that. Silas nodded toward the facility entrance. Which is why I've already started making arrangements. What kind of arrangements? The kind that involves old friends who owe you their lives. The kind that doesn't show up in any official database. The kind that can move without oversight and act without authorization. You've been planning this for a long time. I've been planning this since the day I handed those dogs over to Prometheus Holdings and watched the biggest mistake of my life walk away in a convoy of unmarked vehicles. His voice cracked slightly. I owe you more than I can ever repay, Willow. But this is a start. What an incredible journey this has been. If this story moved you, please leave a comment telling us your favorite moment. Was it the reveal, the general's reaction, or something else entirely? We read every single comment, and your feedback helps us create better stories. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. Dawn broke over Fort Braxton at 05:47, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost inappropriately peaceful, given everything that had happened in the past 16 hours. Willow stood in the center of the canine training yard, surrounded by all 30 dogs and watched by a growing crowd of personnel who had heard what she had done and wanted to witness her for themselves. General Webb arrived at 0600, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Fiona Pierce and a contingent of Pentagon officials who had traveled through the night to be present for what was being called the most significant development in military working dog history since the program's inception. Corporal Levi Martinez arrived precisely on time, as instructed. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, but his eyes were bright with anticipation. You're here, Willow observed. You told me not to be late. I did. She turned to face the assembled crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to conduct a brief demonstration. What you're about to see represents the culmination of 30 years of research, training, and operational experience. It is classified at the highest levels, and everything you witness here is to remain strictly confidential. She raised her hand and began a sequence of signals that lasted approximately 15 seconds. The movements were complex, layered, almost dance-like in their precision. The 30 dogs responded as a single organism. 10 of them sprinted to the perimeter of the training yard, taking up positions that covered every approach vector. 10 more formed a protective circle around the assembled VIPs, their bodies creating a living shield. The remaining 10 executed a complex patrol pattern that seemed random, but actually covered every blind spot and potential vulnerability in the area, all without a single verbal command. The Pentagon officials stood in stunned silence. This is the Ghost Pack Protocol, Willow said, a training methodology that creates an almost telepathic bond between handler and animal. The dogs learn to read micro-expressions, body language, and hand signals at a level that allows for completely silent tactical operations. "How long does it take to train them to this level?" one of the officials asked. "For the dogs? About 3 years of intensive work starting from birth. For the handler?" She paused. "A lifetime." General Webb stepped forward. "Colonel Thornton has agreed to take on an official advisory role in restructuring our entire K-9 program. The methods you've just witnessed will be incorporated into training protocols across all branches of the military. But that's not why I'm really here," Willow added quietly. Webb nodded, having been briefed on Silas Harrison's late-night visit. "Colonel Thornton has also identified a significant threat to national security, an organization that has been operating in the shadows for 2 decades, using stolen military assets and corrupted training protocols to build a private army of weaponized dogs." "Prometheus Holdings," Willow said. "They have the original Ghost Pack dogs, the Foundation stock, and they've been breeding from them for 20 years. The officials exchanged alarmed glances. "What are you proposing?" the senior Pentagon representative asked. "A surgical operation, small team, minimal footprint. We identify their current location, infiltrate the facility, recover the original dogs, and neutralize the threat." That sounds like an act of war if they're operating in foreign territory. "They're operating everywhere," Silas Harrison said, stepping out of the shadows where he had been observing, "including on American soil. 3 of their training facilities are located within our borders. This isn't a foreign threat. It's a domestic cancer that has been growing unchecked for 2 decades. The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the assembled officials. How is that possible? How could a private military organization operate domestically without detection? "Because they've had help." Willow's voice was flat. Hard. "Someone inside the military structure has been protecting them, feeding them intelligence, warning them whenever anyone got too close. Are you suggesting a mole? I'm suggesting a network of moles, multiple penetrations at multiple levels. It's the only explanation for how they've stayed hidden for so long. The implications hung in the air like poison gas. If what Willow was saying was true, the very institutions they were standing in might be compromised. "Then how do we know this meeting isn't being monitored?" the Pentagon official asked nervously. "How do we know they don't already know everything we're planning?" Willow smiled grimly. "Because I haven't told anyone my actual plan. Not General Webb, not the officials here, not even Silas. Then what was all of this? A demonstration? A statement of intent, and a challenge?" She looked directly at the nearest security camera, knowing that whoever was watching would understand her message. "Athena wants to play games in the shadows? Fine. I invented those games. I wrote the rules. And now I'm going to show her what happens when the shepherd comes for her flock." She turned and walked toward the facility exit, Rex falling into step beside her as naturally as breathing. "Where are you going?" General Webb called after her. "To get my dogs back." She paused at the threshold, looking back over her shoulder. "All of them." The helicopter was waiting at the far end of the base, rotors already spinning. Silas Harrison stood beside it, along with a small group of figures that Willow recognized from decades past. Old Ghost Pack handlers, soldiers who had served with her before Kandahar, men and women who owed her their lives and had been waiting for 20 years to repay that debt. Levi Martinez jogged up beside her as she approached the aircraft. "Ma'am, you said training begins at 0500. This doesn't look like training." "It's not." Willow stopped and faced him directly. "This is the real thing, a live operation against a hostile target. I wasn't planning to bring you along, but the dogs made a choice." She nodded toward Rex, who had positioned himself between Levi and the helicopter, clearly waiting for the young corporal to board. "They want you there, and I've learned to trust their judgment. What will I be doing? Watching, learning, staying alive?" Her expression softened slightly. "This is your first lesson, Corporal. Ghost Pack doesn't train in classrooms. We train in the field, under fire, with lives on the line." Levi looked at that police waiting helicopter, at the grim-faced veterans preparing for an operation that might well be their last, at the 30 dogs who had somehow become his family in the span of a single day. "I'm ready," he said. "No, you're not." Willow began walking toward the aircraft. "But you will be, by the time this is over." She climbed aboard and took her position, Rex settling at her feet with the calm certainty of an animal who had done this 100 times before. The helicopter lifted off, banking toward the east, toward an uncertain destination and an enemy who had been preparing for this confrontation for 2 decades. But Willow wasn't afraid. She had her dogs, she had her team. She had a young corporal who represented the future of everything she had built. And she had something that Athena could never understand. Something that couldn't be bought or stolen or corrupted. She had family. The helicopter disappeared into the morning sky, carrying the shepherd toward a reckoning that had been 20 years in the making. Below, at Fort Braxton, General Webb watched it go with a mixture of hope and fear. "Do you think she'll succeed?" Fiona Pierce asked quietly. Webb thought about everything he had witnessed in the past 24 hours. The impossible bond between woman and animal, the absolute loyalty that transcended training and conditioning, the quiet strength that had survived decades of hiding and emerged unbroken. "I think," he said slowly, "that whoever is waiting for her has no idea what's coming." And somewhere in the eastern sky, 30 dogs sat in perfect formation around a woman who had taught them everything they knew. The shepherd was going to war, and her wolves were hungry. The communication device in Willow's pocket buzzed with an incoming message. Coordinates, a location in the mountains of Virginia. 72 hours had become 24. She read the message, memorized it, and destroyed the device. "Change of plans," she announced to the team. "They've accelerated the timeline?" "Trap?" Silas asked. "Almost certainly." Willow smiled, and for the first time in 20 years, it reached her eyes. "But they're forgetting one thing." "What's that?" She looked at Rex, at the 29 other dogs arranged throughout the helicopter, at the young corporal who was about to receive the education of a lifetime. The trap works both ways. The helicopter banked hard, changing course toward the new coordinates, toward destiny, toward whatever waited in the Virginia mountains. Willow leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes, her hand resting on Rex's head. She had spent 3 years mopping floors and being invisible. Now it was time to remind the world why they should have been afraid of her all along. This story reminds us of a truth we too often forget. The most extraordinary people are frequently hiding in plain sight. Willow Thornton spent 3 years mopping floors and enduring ridicule from those who believed their uniforms and medals made them superior. Yet when crisis struck, it was the invisible woman, not the decorated officers, who saved 200 lives. The dogs knew what the humans could not see. They recognized character, not rank. They responded to essence, not appearance. How many times do we walk past someone and make instant judgments based on their job title, their age, their clothing? How many heroes have we dismissed because they did not match our expectations of what a hero should look like? The lesson is simple but profound. Treat every person you meet with dignity and respect, because you never know who they truly are. The janitor might be a legend. The quiet assistant might be a warrior. The old woman with weathered hands might have saved more lives than you will ever know. True strength does not advertise itself. True service does not seek recognition. And true character reveals itself not in moments of glory, but in years of patient, invisible dedication. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the quiet heroes among us. And tomorrow, when you pass someone the world has deemed unimportant, take a moment to really see them, because everyone has a story worth knowing.